Yeah. Okay. All right. For those of you that are here, you're going to hear this one more time. So welcome to the Issues and Answers Forum. I'm Bryce Jacobson. I'm the publisher for the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent and Citizen Telegram in Western Garfield County. I will be your moderator tonight. Unfortunately, Ron Milhorn is unable to join us tonight. This event is brought to you courtesy of tonight's sponsors, the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent, and KMTS. Questions have been collected in advance and sorted to avoid duplication and to ensure that a wide variety of topics are addressed tonight. We will not be taking questions from the audience. This hybrid event is being simultaneously interpreted in Spanish tonight by Catalina Johnson and Albert Gould on Zoom. The event is also being recorded, and those links will be posted on postindependent.com, kmts.com, and glenwoodchamber.com. As the moderator, I will ask the questions of candidates and issue representatives. Each candidate will give a 2-minute opening statement. Questions will be asked in alternating order by last name. There will be a time limit of 90 seconds assigned for answering questions. The candidate that answers the question first will have the opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. Each candidate will then be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. Our timers tonight are Tara Harmon and Angie Anderson. They will hold up a card reminding tonight's speakers that they have 30 seconds left to answer a question. They will also let them know when their time is up. And then these chairs just fall out from underneath the floor. So be warned. The order for tonight is we're going to start with Statewide Amendment 78, and then we'll move to Statewide Proposition 120. Then we'll move on to the City of Glenwood Springs ballot issues 2A and 2B, before going to the Roaring Fork School District Mill Levy Override, which is ballot issue 5B. Then we will go on to the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education candidates, District A and District E. Unfortunately, we do not have any representatives here tonight for Proposition 119. Okay, so we're going to start tonight with, as I said, statement provided by Michael Fields from Colorado Rising State Action. And to start today, we're going to go over his statement, or I'll read his statement from Amendment 78. He submitted, most Coloradoans would probably assume that all state spending is approved by the General Assembly. We all learned early on in school about checks and balances and how the legislative branch has power of the purse. Amendment 78 would fix this problem. It would require all state expenditures to have, 1, to have a public hearing, and 2, to allow representatives from across the state to weigh in on how state money should be spent. In short, it would end executive branch slush funds. These slush funds come in the form of custodial money. These are funds that originated from a source other than the state of Colorado and are provided for a particular purpose. The most notable recent example was when the governor allocated $1.6 billion in CARES Act money completely on his own. Regardless of what you think about how that COVID relief money was doled out, the process itself was troubling. The state also receives money from various legal settlements. The latest one was a $400 million opioid related settlement with drug companies. While most settlements have specific directions on where that money needs to go, the leftover money or interest can be spent by the Attorney General. This could be millions of dollars that currently go into a slush fund instead of sent to the general fund to help pay for priorities like education, healthcare, or transportation. Amendment 78 allows the legislature to work with the executive branch to plan ahead. Legislators can look at what is working well now and make sure those processes continue. They can choose to do continual appropriations to make sure funds are allocated in a timely manner. Besides, a vast majority of state money already goes through the budget process. One person should not be in charge of spending millions of dollars without transparency and accountability. Vote yes on Amendment 78. And again, that statement is from Michael Fields from Colorado Rising State Action. Okay, so Mary Ann, will you join me up here? We're going to go and I'm going to read a statement from Michael Fields and then also then Mary Ann will say a few words. Okay, Michael Fields wrote in, as written, Proposition 120 would cut property taxes by $1 billion. It's a 9% cut for both residential and non-residential property. If you read the Blue Book, you've seen that the legislature is trying to thwart this ballot issue and make it only apply to multifamily and lodging properties. If the measure passes, the courts will ultimately decide what happens. Since the ballot language is controlling, not the Blue Book, we think we have a good legal case. The reason a property tax cut is important is because property values are skyrocketing year over year. Earlier this year, most Coloradans had a sticker shock when they received their new assessments, which showed double-digit increases to the value of their properties. For people who want to stay in their homes, a 15% increase to their property taxes can have a big impact. There are a lot of families out there who are just trying to make ends meet in these uncertain economic times. And when taxes are increasing faster than wages, it becomes a significant burden. And for seniors and people on fixed incomes, the stakes are even higher. Increased taxes could eventually force them out of their homes. On the business side, Colorado's effective commercial property rate is almost twice as high as Utah and 3 times as high as Wyoming. If we want to stay competitive with other states in our region and ensure we have good paying jobs here in Colorado, we can't ignore these types of burdens on businesses. This discussion about property taxes comes at a time when state and local governments have more money than ever. Revenue to state and local governments has bounced back, and they have received over $12 billion in stimulus funds from the federal government. This means our education system is getting an additional $2.5 billion influx of money. This makes this the right time to provide property tax relief to Coloradans. Vote yes on Proposition 120. Okay. Mary Ann Virgili is a trustee of Colorado Mountain College, and she's going to have a statement as well.
Good evening. I sit on the Board of Trustees for Colorado Mountain College, and we are going by the Blue Book. Just so you know, I don't have the initiative right here. I do have it in my notes if anybody wants to ask me later, but Senator Rankin did introduce another bill that would lessen the very negative impacts of the original proposition. So anyway, here's why we oppose Proposition 120. Essentially, Proposition 120 proposes to lower property tax assessment rates for multifamily housing and lodging properties. Now, the premise is that if property tax assessments are lowered, the multifamily landlords would lower their rents. This doesn't, it's a nice thought, but it's a very big leap. Supply and demand is what regulates rent, not property taxes. Right now, the vacancies are less than 0.5% for apartments. Rents will remain high. The other part of this is the lodging industry, which for some reason is singled out when this is talking about tourism. Tourism isn't just lodging, it's activities, attractions, and restaurants. So the premise is the lodging industry would be able to lower their roommates and attract more visitors. Well, this again isn't logical. We have, right now, we have rebounded faster than almost any state in the country regarding tourism. If you've tried to book a room lately, you know what I'm talking about. Rates are sky high. And, it's great that the lodging industry is recovering, but a lower property tax assessment doesn't necessarily translate into a lower room rate. So what would happen if this passed? First of all, Proposition 120 would erode the revenue base for essential services such as schools, fire districts, hospitals, and certain colleges like CMC. These losses would result in cuts to services or increases in fees or tuition at a time when our population is increasing and demands for healthcare are increasing. In 2020, taxpayers across the state passed Amendment B, which ended the Gallagher Amendment's downward ratchet. 1 year later, the proponents of Proposition 120 are trying to restart Gallagher under a different name. It's an example of not being willing to accept the outcome of a majority vote in Colorado. Moreover, the taxpayer of CMC's district overwhelmingly voted in favor of allowing the college to override Gallagher. The same vote occurred in mountain communities across the state. Proposition 120 would add confusion to an already jumbled tax code. There's no reason to adjust tax revenues for multi-unit housing and lodging, but not other areas. It's an example of an opportunistic power grab, not sound policy. CMC believes that our tax laws should be consistent and fair, not arbitrary and piecemeal. We also believe that local taxpayers have spoken loudly that they value high quality education and health care, and we'd like to keep that intact.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next City of Glenwood Springs ballot issue 2A and 2B. Greg, if you come up. And
I love it, didn't say anything about it. So I want.
Yeah, it's just who you are. And you get the privilege of listening to me again, read another statement. Perfect. So the Glenwood Springs, this was written by Jonathan Jonas. The Glenwood Springs Airport has been chronically underinvested in for years. This has led to safety, security, and operational concerns that are long overdue, and in many cases urgent. The safety issues alone include the following: jet fuel tanks on private property that are non-code compliant and in close proximity to residential housing and vegetation, noxious and invasive weeds like goat heads causing flat tires for private pilots, perimeter reflectors for low visibility situations, communication systems to alert pilots of runway hazards, perimeter fencing to minimize wildlife and humans on the runway. There are an additional $11 million in upgrades and improvements that are specific to small private planes and their need for a runway. The improvements have been recommended by the airport users, the Volunteer Airport Commission, and city staff. This amount includes $5.5 million for a tunnel under the runway to allow for private pilots to continue to have a landing strip as Southbridge planning moves forward. This amount is not something that either the city has the ability to fund, nor do the airport users. This is why City Council authorized a ballot question to see if the public would support a property tax of $8 million. This funding is urgently needed so that small engine private pilots can have a safe, functional, and financially secure airstrip without severely impacting the budgets of other city departments. While we are always searching for additional grant funding, the city needs to plan for the future, regardless of scarce and speculative outside funding sources. This ballot question does not ask for funds to maintain the existing helicopter operations. Having the ability to house, fuel, and maintain helicopters for the hospital and firefighting operations is a critical life and safety resource. The city and its residents are committed to keeping this vital facility no matter what. Regardless of the outcome of the mill levy ask, helicopter operations will remain an integral and important part of Glenwood Springs. Mr. Rippey, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Greg Rippey. It's interesting what I just heard there. And if you listen closely, the mayor did not say, he said continued helicopter operations. He didn't say continued aircraft operations. The city council referred two measures to the ballot, that asked that the taxes be raised $1.2 million annually for 20 years by an ad valorem tax of $4 million. 2B asked to allow the city to raise their debt, not quite like the mayor said, with a maximum repayment of $14 million for construction projects at the municipal airport, including construction of a tunnel, an fixed base operation, I almost used an acronym, hangars and fuel farm. I'm a second generation pilot and I've served on the airport's commission for 8+ years. The first thing I want to make clear is that the ballot issue was not created or worded by the airport commission or the current users. The airport was established by lands donated at a nominal cost to the city, who passed a resolution in 1937 that was titled Resolution Pledging that the municipal airport at the city of Glenwood Springs will at all times be operated for the public's benefit. That's pretty straightforward. Where does the idea of building a tunnel under the airport come from? Following the 2002 coal seam fire, the city began looking for alternate ingress and egress to the city and began exploring the South Bridge option. Following study groups and stakeholder meetings, looking at 36 alternates, the council decided in 2013 on one plan that necessitated a tunnel under the airport. This alternate was chosen as a compromise in balancing multiple needs: wetlands, private property, and access to Highway 82. In October of last year, the final environmental assessment was signed. This included the tunnel. The cost of the South Bridge is now estimated at approximately $57 million, of which 4.7 is estimated for the tunnel. When the design utilizing the airport tunnel was selected, it was not selected with the caveat, if we can raise taxes to pay for it. Now the city, in an effort to fund and pay for the South Bridge, which I support, has tied the exposure or the expense to the airport. But the ballot measure is a South Bridge issue, not an airport issue. Know that the Glenwood Springs Airport operates as an enterprise fund with user fees paying for operations and improvements, and no general fund monies have been expended. The current airport is functional, safe, and in need of minimal upgrades. 67 airplanes are permanently based at the airport. Again, this ballot issue and the exorbitant price tag is not being asked for by the current airport users. Glenwood Springs Airport enjoys a wide base of community support for its continued operations and the role it plays in serving our community for medical services, firefighting, and as an important component of a multimodal transportation system. I'm not advocating that you vote yes or no, but pay attention to how the council will interpret this vote to subsequently alter or eliminate our local airport.
Thank you, sir.
Nobody wrote questions for me?
Nobody wrote any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, Autumn.
Yep.
Okay, next we have Roaring Fork School District ballot issue 2A and 2B. For this ballot question, we have two representatives from the 5B campaign. There will not be a debate, but we do have time for some questions. So we'll start with an opening statement. This is a combined 2 minutes from either both of you or one.
No, I'll close.
Ready?
Yep, ready.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna hear your voice real
I should
loud.
probably introduce you. This is Autumn Rivera. She's a 5B campaign, as well as Rob Stein, who's also on the 5B campaign.
Awesome, thank you. My name is Autumn Rivera. I'm a 6th grade science teacher at Glenwood Springs Middle School. And thank you for having us here. I had to sneak over from my second job that I'm currently working, had to leave my class early so I can come here. And I'm one of multiple teachers. Actually, 75% of our teachers in Roaring Fork School District have to work more than one job in order to afford to live here. Roaring Fork School District is in the middle of a staffing crisis. We started out the school year with over 70 positions unfilled, and we're still working on trying to fill those different positions. A couple years ago, I worked with teachers on our interest-based bargaining committee and our administration from different buildings to kind of discuss and look at our budget to see what we can do as a district. And we did some work, but we really cut our budget to the bone, and we still are having teachers leaving because they cannot afford to live here. And when we offer jobs to new teachers, 75% of them turn it down because they look at the cost of living here and they can't afford to live here. And so the problem is in this district is not only do we have it's the third most expensive district to live in all of Colorado. Of 178 districts, we live in the third most expensive district. And we have, unfortunately, we get about the lower third percentage of our per pupil funding from the state. So we have a low per pupil funding, we have a really high cost of living. It's creating this perfect storm where teachers and staff cannot afford to live here. And so we're really in a unique situation, especially the districts around us also are getting more mill levy funding from their different communities. And we are actually the lowest of the 5 surrounding communities. And so we really are asking for a vote yes on 5B in order to support our teachers, because we need to have a strong school so that we can have our strong community.
Thank you. So the representatives will have a total of 90 seconds to respond to each of the following questions. Question 1, why didn't the school district use federal dollars received from the pandemic or dollars used from other construction projects to fund staff salary increases?
So there's three sources of funding, normally two, that we could look at: a bond or a mill levy, and now these federal dollars. Federal dollars are one-time dollars that you can't put into salaries because they're going to sunset. Furthermore, in the rules for the federal dollars, it's supposed to be for COVID relief, making up for lost learning, investments in things like HVAC to make our environments healthier. They may not be used for bonuses or salaries. So those are off the table. You asked about construction dollars. The voters generously approved a bond in 2015 that went towards building pretty much building a new school in Glenwood Springs and two new schools in Glenwood Springs, so up here downtown and at Riverview. But those are one-time construction dollars, so those can't also be used for salaries. They sunset when the construction project is finished.
Okay. Question number 2. If this fails, what can the school district do to help address this problem?
What we're looking at is cutting programs, increasing class sizes, because we've reached a point where we can't have, there's nothing left to do. And so what we're really asking is to be able to keep our schools open full time. Downtown Glenwood, it's hard to find a restaurant at lunchtime because they just close the doors if they don't have staff. We don't want to exercise an option like that. So really, there aren't good alternatives. We've exhausted any other means possible.
Okay. Question number 3. Where exactly do the mill levy dollars go, and how will that impact salaries?
So the mill levy dollars will go 100% towards staff and teacher salaries. 75% will go towards the actual salary piece, and 25% will go towards recruitment and retaining of new teachers so we can bring them in. It will not go towards district leadership salaries.
Wait a minute. Just kidding.
It'll just go towards teacher and staff. And so not just teachers, but our bus drivers, our custodial workers, our secretaries. We're working so hard right now to really try to help support us. It's going for all of that. On average, they will see between a 10 and 12% range. It'll differ depending on the staff level, but really trying to help support everyone here that's trying to keep our community strong.
Okay. So what can voters expect to see from the district in the future? Is this one of the many acts, or will the district try to figure something else out to address funding issues?
Well, we're working on every source we can, but according to state law, this is pretty much maxing out our mill levy capacity. So we can't come back to the voters for another mill levy. This will max us out.
Okay, so I guess it's are there other so mill levy override that's done, maxed out? Theoretically, there's opportunity for that as the economy grows, but are you going to try to figure out something else to come back to taxpayers to ask for?
We have no. I mean, for example, we're way in the future because we've just built 2 new school, expanded capacity and built a whole new school. There may be a time in the future when we need a new school, and those are typically bond funded. When you look at our enrollment, it's been stable. The enrollment, I think we expected more growth in children over time. That's what all the demographers predicted, but we're not seeing that yet. So it will be many years before we reach the point where we came back and asked for a bond. But that's how you pay for new schools, is with bonds. So there may be a future time when that's necessary. That's asking us all to predict the future demographics.
Okay. So more bonds or more children?
If there are more children, there might be more bonds. Everybody do your parts.
Plus more people for pupil funding will come on. Okay, question number 5. What more can be done at a state level to help solve the school funding issues?
You didn't ask Greg all these questions. You want to try that one?
Yeah, I think a lot, just trying to advocate at the state level, it is that if you're not familiar with how the taxes work in Colorado, it definitely creates a situation that's very hard for Colorado educators to properly fund our students. We have seniors this year that are graduating that have never experienced a year of school that's been fully funded. They've always just had these piecemeal pieces put together. And so it is going to take something at a state level to really work on this. And as an educator, I'm definitely working time and time again at different state events. I'm on a board of a couple different organizations that we're trying to work with the state, but it's going to take more than just educators. It's going to take us as a community working together to really try to rally and let people know that Colorado is an amazing state. We should definitely not be in the bottom 5 numbers of education pay in our education system.
Okay. And Rob, I think you said you were going to do closing statements, so 2 minutes.
Okay, I don't know if everybody knows, I'm the superintendent of the school district, but I'm here as a private citizen because I can think of nothing more important for our schools, our children, and our staff than making this mill levy happen. Autumn touched on this. The way funding works in Colorado is there's a state funding formula which tries but doesn't adequately address local factors. And that's why Roaring Fork School District, even though it's the third highest cost of living school district in the state, is in the bottom third in state funding. So that gives us this other tool called the mill levy override, which by state law allows us to go for about 25% of our state funding from local voters. All of the neighboring school districts have a locally voter approved mill levy overrides higher than the Roaring Fork schools. Eagle, Aspen, Garfield RE2, Garfield RE16, which is Parachute, all have higher mill levy override funding than we do, so it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. Aspen, which is an adjacent school district to ours, when we go up past the Salt to Old Snowmass, is funded about $4,000 more per student than we are. So you can imagine how hard it is for us to retain a teacher when they're looking at just driving a few miles and having that much higher salaries. So that's really what we're asking here is an equalizer to help us retain and recruit staff so that we can offer a full range of programs for all of your kids.
Okay, well, thank you both. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
We don't get to ask questions, right?
Right.
Good.
Not today, I'm sure. They'll both be available for you.
Catch us outside and be happy to talk.
Okay, we'll now move on to the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education candidates for District A and B. Okay, so for District A, we have Chase McWhorter, Kenny
Teitler.
Teitler. I knew I was gonna say it wrong. District E has Stephen Koshin and Catherine Kuhlenberg. So opening statements, they're allowed for 2 minutes a person. And so we'll go ahead and start with you, Mr. McWhorter.
Sure. Well, thank you, everybody. I don't need all 2 minutes. What prompted me to run for the school board in August, so this hasn't been a long process for me, really came down to parental involvement in some of the school's decisions. It's not necessarily questioning decisions, it's more the process. I'm a process-oriented person. I look at the organizational chart for the Roaring Fork School District, and I see parents, students at the top along with the board. And I would say I wonder how much that's being carried out in practice. So my objective is simply to look at the organizational chart and have that be put into active practice day in and day out. My personal background comes from more the business world, finance, a lot of experience working with boards, things like that. So obviously my counterpart here, Kenny, obviously has an education background. I look at my background being more understanding functioning boards and how they should behave in an oversight capacity, which is in my view just what they're supposed to do. Provide oversight, provide guidance, and let teachers teach, administrators administrate, and just provide critical oversight. Personally, I have 2 young boys entering the school district, so do have some skin in the game on the horizon that is definitely very, very much part of my reasoning for doing this is having kids that are about to go in. It hits home for me. And I think my time's up, so I'll pause there.
You did need those 2 minutes. Mr. Teitler.
Hi, my name is Kenny Teitler, and I was a teacher for 26 years in the Roaring Fork School District before retiring 2 years ago. And during my time in the district, I always wondered why there weren't teachers that after retirement became part of the school board. And so after arriving at the point where that was a possibility for me to do, and I realized I need to put my money where my mouth was of my thinking, and so I've decided I would love to become part of the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education. I taught for 12 years up in Basalt. I taught for 14 years in Carbondale. And I think this experience, as I said, will give me a perspective that I'll be able to put to good use on the board and being able to represent teachers, which will in turn represent children and make for good learning. Additionally, I had two daughters who recently graduated from Roaring Fork High School, and they, by being in the school system, it gave me the parent perspective. And unlike Chase, where I don't have my children in the school district, I believe that at this point I'll be able to look at what is best for all children and not being able to look at it in a lens of what's best for my children. I've attended numerous school board meetings over my years. I've been on accountability committees for the school district, for my own schools that I was in, and I understand what goes into board governance through those experiences and about updating policy as it relates to school. I also have a long time working with second language learners, and I want to put that to good use. My goals are to represent teachers, to make sure that we're looking at hiring and recruiting and making sure we're having academic success while closing the achievement gaps. That's a big part of our problems in our school district that exists, and I want to be a bridge between the community and the schools. And as a person, I listen deeply, I ask clarifying questions, and I seek understanding.
Thank you. And for District E, we'll start with you, Mr. Foshin.
Hello, my name is Stephen Foshin. I'm a father of four. 3 Aspen graduates, 1 currently in private school about to enter Basalt High School. I myself am a product of public school, be it a long time and many curriculums ago. I'm a 30-year Valley resident, a business owner, a general contractor, a life and wellness coach, as well as a competitive athlete. I decided to run for the school board after much thought and deliberation due to the current climate of the world and, more importantly, the dismal state of education. It is my belief that in order to provide the best possible education for all students, balanced input is required. That means, or what that means to me, is parents first, educators, faculty, and government cooperating together in the best interest of the students. I currently don't believe this is happening. Parents are being required, parents being required as they are the most invested in the student's future, not just a 12 to 18-year obligation, but a lifetime commitment, and there's an enormous difference there. I would like to provide myself as a conduit between the parents and school board, given the opportunity. I will lend my very reasonable voice and ears to that cause. My opponent, Catherine, is certainly more versed for this position, although I don't think of her as an opponent, more as your other option, since we both want the same thing, and that is to do better for the students of this valley. I can tell you from experience, though, not as a litigator or educator, but as a businessman. Solving problems takes action. I would like to offer a different perspective, a fresh set of eyes, and perhaps new ideas, perhaps something outside the box, not by those in the box. I will bring a businessman and parents' perspective to the issues the school board faces, and there are many, all of which require strong resolve, compassion, and a considerable amount of effort to find and execute the solutions. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mrs. Kuhlenberg.
Hi, my name is Catherine Kuhlenberg, and I opted to run for the school board for various reasons. I was lobbied by some friends and neighbors, first and foremost. I have 3 young kids myself, my oldest being a first grader at Basalt Elementary, my youngest having just turned 2. So I have about 17 years ahead of me in the Roaring Fork School District. We live in Basalt, and our kids will go to Basalt Elementary. I have a very strong background in education. It's been a driving force in my life. I put myself through college by coming out to Aspen and working in a local preschool, and ended up with a degree in, it's a self-designed major entitled Education Policy, Navigating the Public School System, and also in psychology with a focus on the child. I came back to the Valley and worked at a public school as a preschool special educator and child find coordinator, and then entered law school, where again I focused on education and education policy, and was given a letter to that effect, which is not common, but my work was so focused on education that my school was willing to provide that. After that, I practiced law for 3 years, and then I came back and took over the preschool in Aspen and bought it. So I currently own and operate a private preschool. I don't receive any tax dollars for that. So I have an understanding of what it takes to run a school from that perspective. I also feel like I have a very broad understanding of what it takes to be a public educator and to be in classrooms. So I feel like I bring a perspective to the board of a parent, of an educator, and of a policymaker. At this point in my life, I'm very busy with 3 kids and a business, but I feel like what I have to offer to the board is great, and I feel like that I'm ready to serve in this capacity. So I'm hopeful that I can.
Okay, thank you. So each candidate will be asked the same question, and it is allowed 90 seconds to respond. We will alternate between District A and District E candidates. Whoever answers the question first will then have a chance for a rebuttal, which will be 30 seconds after your opponents or the other options answer. So question number 1. In recent testing for English language arts, district student results fell below state and national averages in all available data. What do you think Roaring Fork School District could do to improve educational outcomes for students? And we'll start with you, Mrs. Colbert.
So I think that we need to look at this from varying perspectives. I think we need to disaggregate the data and break it down and look at where our students are performing based on a number of different factors. So are they English language learners? Are they native English speakers? How long have they been in the district? All of those things. This last year of data isn't particularly helpful because of COVID. So I think we need to look back if we're really going to dive into data, and hopefully we can be back in a position after a full year of school in person this year where the data will be more useful. But when we're looking at things, we're not woefully below comparing comparable districts. When you're looking at Caucasian students, we're relatively close to Aspen scores. When you're looking at English language learners, we are a lot lower, and we need to figure out where we can provide better support. I come from a background of early childhood, and I firmly believe in the importance of early childhood education. And I firmly believe that that is the one point in time where we can prevent a gap from starting in the first place. So coming down the pipe are some dollars for universal pre-K, and I think those need to be used well. And we need to figure out how to use those in a way that is going to prevent this gap from beginning in the first place.
Okay. We're okay?
Yeah, a video went out, so I'm just gonna check the settings on that real quick.
Just bear with us. Keep in mind what she said.
You're like, it's still on. I'm recording.
Is interpreting still working?
Yeah, and audio is fine.
It thumbs up now.
Okay, just have to press some buttons.
I do have a face for newspapers, so maybe that's.
Well, actually, facing down.
What's that?
It's facing the wrong way.
The one we don't want.
Is it focusing on Greg again?
Say no.
Keep looking at that. Information was there.
You see that right there?
Yeah.
Time's up.
I thought you had 30 more seconds.
No pressure. Well, I think while you're doing that, maybe the video isn't as important. We'll go ahead and keep working on that if you can answer.
Sure.
Mr. Foshin.
And I agree with most of what Catherine, actually all of what Catherine has discussed, but I'd like to expand on that a little bit further. I think part of the problem is the methodology that we're using to teach our students from K through high school. We need to, there's not a one size fits all way of learning, and there should not be one size fits all method of teaching. And I think that we're kind of stuck in public school where we're confined to one or two methods as opposed to 6 or 7 different methods to teach the individual, be it social, cultural, or learning abilities are far more important than just the one size fits all in the box.
Can you respond?
I would agree. I mean, I think that I have a strong belief that teachers are professionals and we need to give our educators the latitude that they've earned and that they deserve in teaching their classrooms of children. So part of increasing scores is, of course, adapting to the needs of our student population and adjusting things as necessary.
Okay, very good. Thank you. District A, we'll start with you first, Mr. Teitler.
Thank you. I would also agree with a lot that Catherine had to say. And I think it's important that we, as she said, disaggregate data as we look at it. I look back at the 2019 data for CMAS, which is the most recent data that we have that's the full set of data before a pandemic. And if you look at that data, our Anglo population in our schools was testing at a higher rate than the state levels of Anglo students. We were also on par with Aspen and higher than any of our other surrounding districts for our Anglo learners. On the other hand, our Latino learners were below the state average for Latinos. And so if we look at our data in a disaggregated sense, our Latino students are scoring 40 points below our Anglo students on our testing. And so I think where we need to put our focus and what we need to do differently is look at what we need to do for our Latino learners while continuing to doing the good job that we are doing for our Anglo learners. And I think I am well qualified in this position to find ways to do that. I have a degree in cultural and linguistic diversity with a master's degree in reading for second language learners. And so I think I have a lot of ideas, and my experience there will help me be able to help the district in that role.
Very good. Mr. McWhorter.
I'm not going to be able to have an original thought if I'm going to
What happened to that?
No, you want to, I think if you look at, like everybody said, if you're looking at data, like I said at the beginning, taking a more corporate background, looking at a board function, it's almost like you want to come in with an auditor's mindset, financially and operations. So if you do break this up into Anglo Latino, like everybody said, my concern is when you do that, you could potentially be perpetuating a problem. You're identifying based on these different classification systems. Oh, you're over here in this category, and then you're over here in this category, versus taking a view of everybody as just a learner. It appears that we're just kind of classifying people based on the most basic level of understanding of, well, you're a Latino, you're an Anglo, this is where you are right now, and we're just going to sit there. So I think from a board function, because we're not educators, we're not auditioning to be teachers, we're auditioning to be on the board. I think it does come down to taking a top level view from, again, in my view, maybe an auditor perspective, from finances, where are those resources going? Like identify problems there, and then operationally, where are resources going there to identify the problem? So it does go back to data, but you have to do something with that. Data by itself is pretty much pointless. You actually have to apply it.
Okay, very good. Tyler.
I think it is important, as Chase is saying, yes, we need to know board governance as part of a school board, but we're also have to do, a part of our job is identifying educational priorities and making strategic planning. And yes, we don't want to just say either you're Latino or Anglo. That's not the point I'm trying to make. When we have students coming into our school, they're coming in with different backgrounds at different educational levels and different levels of English. And so we need to treat them differently with different needs.
Okay, very good. So now you get the original thought. Question number 2, and coincidentally, it's very much in line with what we're talking about right now. So Garfield County's Hispanic and Latino population continues to increase in size. What do you think the Roaring Fork School District could do to make sure our Hispanic and Latino communities are provided the best education possible?
I mean, I think a lot of these problems go back to the very beginning, as far as you look at the organizational chart. I mean, there's still parents that are coming in here. So their parents are wanting what's best for their kids as they're moving here. I think parental engagement, fostering the parent-teacher relationship, pushing on that, I think that's where, from my perspective, is where you could see a lot of maybe more positive change, getting actually down, the boots on the ground, work with the teachers, what's happening there. Again, I think that there's an aspect of looking at these things as far as demographics. You're getting away from just the general concept of educating. I don't like the idea of classifying based on cultural background. I think you're setting a low bar to start. That's not a good thing. That, well, this is where we're at with this group, and this is what you have to overcome. In my view, it's all ships rise with the tide, and I think you should have a high standard for everyone, not segmenting based on cultural background. So as the Latino community grows in Garfield and Glenwood, I don't think you necessarily have to take I don't think you should be driven solely based on background and culture. You should have the same standard across the board.
Okay. Mr. Teitler?
I would agree with Chase that we shouldn't be basing decisions solely on background and culture. And I think we do need to, however, look at what children need according to their background, their education, and in this instance, the level of English that they're coming to our school district with. So if you have a student who is coming, starting kindergarten, who doesn't speak English, you cannot teach them the same way you could teach another student who's coming into kindergarten who is fluent in English. They have different needs, they're going to need different services, they're going to need different programming. And as part of that program that we need to do is we need to make sure we are meeting those needs of each of the different students. We need to make sure that we are using the Spanish that children come to kindergarten with as a positive trait and as a productive thing that we can build on. Our district has many different programs where they're using the children's native language to help them learn their academics. So we need to do two things for children who are second language learners. We need to teach them English, obviously. They need to be fluent in English, they need to be proficient in English. But at the same time as they're learning English, they need to learn their academics at the same time. And if they don't have the language skills necessary, then it's going to be difficult for them to learn the academics. And so we need to do that as a two-pronged approach for our students and making sure we're taking the high priority of continuing to teach our first language English students at a high level.
I mean, just to I guess piggyback on that point, I think a key first step, and if you're trying to plan for the future, is to look at what's been done historically. And if we're pointing to statistics as far as how poorly the Latino community has done compared to the Anglo community, then you might want to look at what you've done the last 5-10 years to get to that point and not repeat it. So I think that would be maybe a key first step, is identifying why. What have we been doing that's led to this?
Okay, very good, thank you. Same question to you folks. In District E, we'll start with you, Mr. Potion.
Would you read the question again for me, please?
I will. Garfield County's Hispanic and Latino population continues to increase. What do you think Roaring Fork School District could do to make sure our Hispanic and Latino communities are provided the best education possible?
I think it starts with communication on that. Since we have what's the word I want? Students that speak only Spanish and come into school, we cannot, literally, like Ken said, we can't teach them in English. We need to teach them academically, but we also need to teach them English so that they can learn lessons that are being taught. We also don't want to hold back the students that are predominantly speaking English. We need to figure out, can we, or do we have the resources to teach classes in Spanish as well as English, or have a bilingual teacher teach those classes so we can bridge that communication gap between the students' communication and their skill that they're trying to be taught at that particular time.
Mrs. Goldberg?
So I think the first and most important step in my mind is establishing a relationship with the families and with these students, because they're coming into a new community. And especially if they're not speaking English, it's got to be overwhelming in many ways. So we have our family liaison center. So I think expanding on some of that work and that outreach would be first. Beyond that, I think that we need to be looking at what are some of the best, research-based curriculums where we're getting the best outcomes for both the Hispanic students and the Anglo students. My daughter's in the dual language program at Basalt Elementary, and we've been nothing but impressed with that so far. It's a way to both teach the Anglo students Spanish and teach the English language learners English. And she's in first grade and she's speaking a fair amount of Spanish, and it's been great. But I think that it comes back to looking at what's out there, looking at what the research shows are some of the best routes to take, and then implementing those. And then going back and seeing what's working, what's not working. What do we have the personnel to do? What does our population need? Are we engaging families? Are they happy? So it's a big problem, and it's not easy to provide an answer in 2 minutes. But
How much time do you need?
I don't know, 2 years.
All right, rebuttal, Mr. Foshi.
No further comments.
Moving on to question number 3, we'll start with you guys down there, District E. Do you think education has improved, stayed flat, or decreased in quality in the Roaring Fork School District in the past 10 years? And please explain your answer. We'll start with you, Mrs. Goldberg.
So I think what's expected in education has changed dramatically nationwide. As I said, I run a preschool, and what my preschoolers need to know now going into kindergarten is dramatically different than what they needed to know 5 to 7 years ago. So what's being expected of our students has changed. I have just gotten into going back and looking at data and figuring out where the Roaring Fork School District has been and where it's going. My preschool has been in Aspen, and I've had my hands and my feet in up there. I sat on their district accountability committee, and that's where I send my students. So we were engaged up there quite a bit, but really I've only been engaged here in the last couple of years. I've heard from community members that they feel that things have gone down. And that's something that I have started going back and pulling data off of the state website and trying to put together some sort of chart to figure out where things lie and where test scores have gone. But I don't have a clear answer. I recognize some issues. I see some things that are done very well. And I think that as I get more into this and as I discover more and see more, I could have a clear answer on that.
Okay. Mr. Foshi.
I tend to believe that our level of education has decreased over the last 10 years, not necessarily in the Roaring Fork Valley, but across the nation, because our expectations for educating have become skewed, if you will, since we started teaching to testing instead of teaching to think. Our methods have changed from making or allowing kids to regurgitate information that they've been fed as opposed to coming to conclusions on their own. And this has been driven by funding, which is dedicated through results. And that has kind of corrupted the school system and the curriculum that's being taught today at school.
Okay, very good. Mrs. Goldberg, do you have that result?
Yes. So I don't think that I disagree that there's been an overall decline in education. As I said, I think what's expected and the amount that we're expected to cover with students has increased. And I think at the same time, societally, there has been a decrease in the amount of respect and professionalism that we provide our teachers and educators. And I think that's resulted in this feeling of dissatisfaction with public education.
Very good. Okay, District A, Mr. Teitler.
So I think over the past 10 years, there has been many difficulties in education, but But I do believe overall we are continuing to move forward. I believe some of those difficulties are what is being given to the teacher as needed to be done, and the plate is getting piled on higher and higher on the teacher with more and more expected of the teacher. And so I think it's part of our job, will be our job on the board, is to make sure we are taking some of the duties off of the plate of the teacher so they can focus more on what is needed for the students to be successful. I think as a district, we've had many positive things that we've been able to achieve in these last 10 years. I think we have been able to focus our curriculum from the district, from a countrywide level. Curriculum has been given us more definition of what we need to teach. I would agree with Steve that we need to be careful of teaching to the test and how much tests are asking us to do and how scripted we are getting with that. And we need to have that good thinking time to make sure the kids are good thinkers. But overall, I think some positives that we've done in our district is we have a seal of biliteracy that is allowing for bilingualism for both Anglos and Latinos. And we have moved forward with some programming at GSES at Riverview that is allowing for more bilingual opportunities for students.
Mr. McWhorter?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of issues that we have as a school district they're not limited to us, from staffing, from performance. I mean, I don't think that this is a unique, we're living in a vacuum here. I mean, these are national issues. I mean, I've tracked statistics for 20 years. We're continuing to put more money and the performance continues to go down globally as far as us being competitive. And the ultimate objective is that you want to be able to advance and eventually get a job, provide for yourself, function in society. I mean, based on a lot of the metrics in a global economy, we're not doing good. So, I mean, I think this is where, even if we are on a good path, you should always strive to do better. This is where I just wonder how low are we setting the bar when it comes to, again, not just us, but nationally. And I think you start digging into statistics, again, us competitive globally, our school district comparatively. I question how much the performance is. And I completely agree how much we're putting on teachers, that they're not just teaching their subject, the amount of stuff that is piled on them. I completely empathize with that. And I do think, as Kenny said, that should be a function of the board, is focus on teaching your subject. Let's start with that, because it seems like it's a crazy thing to even say that.
Okay, rebuttal, Mr. Teitler.
The only thing I would just want to add is, and maybe going back a little bit to a previous question, is an important thing that we need to do to make sure our education continues to move forward is to bring parents into the fold and make sure we are doing that in a way that is productive and we're getting their input. And right now, we need to make sure when we are having meetings that we are having our entire student population at these meetings, because we have 55% of our students are Latino, and we have nowhere close to 55% of the parent involvement being Latino. So we need to have participation for all.
Okay, very good. Question 4, are you in favor of or against Colorado Proposition 119? LEAP, Learning, Enrichment, and Academic Progress Program? Why or not? So we'll start with District A. Start with you, Mr. McWhorter.
I would say at a high level, I do support. I can't really give incredible detail as to why. I would say I just, in general, I do support, and this isn't going to take that much time. I haven't dug in too much to it, but I know in general, I do support it.
Mr. Teitler?
I too am needing to dig in a little bit deeper. I think there's positives that would come out of 119. I like the fact that there's tutoring money available. I think that would be great. And I know that tutoring money is supposed to go towards disadvantaged students first. And so I think the opportunity to use those marijuana funds to fund education is a positive. And so I think that would be a great thing to be able to have tutoring that wasn't available in another way. I think the danger is in some of the underwritten parts of it, in which parts I want to dig deeper, is about how much of those funds then are going to be taken away and given to outside of the public education funds. and being given to sort of a charter type funding that wouldn't stay in the public education system.
Anything? District D, Mr. Foshin.
I'm just now been introduced to the LEAP program. But to expand on what Kenny was saying, we need to have more control of where those funds are going to be allocated to and not lost in administrative and non-educational programs that are going to benefit our school district.
Okay, Mrs. Bloomberg.
I'll be the black sheep. I am against 119. So I believe that our schools are so woefully underfunded from the state, 47th out of 50 right now. And the prospect of putting more state tax dollars into private hands doesn't sit well with me. I think if our schools were fully funded, this would be one thing, but we're not. And so what LEAP essentially does is create a voucher system, and it provides vouchers for parents to use to get additional tutoring for their students to make up for COVID learning loss. And so I feel that instead of these dollars going to corporations like Sylvan, Kaplan, other tutoring agencies, that these dollars should be put into our schools, and our schools should be fully funded first before pushing out money.
Okay, Mr. Foshin, anything to add to that? All right. Question number 5. What is your plan to implement universal pre-K as mandated by the state by 2023? Start with you, Mrs. Bloomberg.
My favorite question. So I am an early childhood educator, and I think that this program can go very well or it can go very wrong. Currently, the state is setting up a statewide administrative office for early childhood, one of the first like it in the nation. And in the school year 23-24, we are expected to provide 10 hours a week for all 4-year-olds that want pre-K. So it's universal pre-K, but it's a bit of a misnomer because it's not mandatory. The mandatory school age will still be 6. At the district level, I think what we do is going to be largely dependent on what the Office of Early Childhood puts out. I believe that the funds will be available to use in a combination of both private and district preschools. Either way, there's going to be a large amount of money coming down from the state and being dispersed at a local level. So what we need to do here is make sure that we are providing high quality early childhood education. We are teaching children how to learn, how to be in a classroom during these pre-K years. As an early childhood educator, I don't think it's a huge academic focus. It should be more on making sure that these kids have exposure to school. They know how to walk in a line, how to raise their hand and ask to go to the bathroom, how to sit in a circle without pulling their friend's hair. All of those things are things that have to be taught and learned. And having a program that does those is important. And so making sure that the programs where this money is going into are providing that environment is going to be.
Mr. Foshin.
I'm in no position to offer an opinion on this either way because I've not done my homework on this topic.
Okay. Just come over and give any rebuttal.
I can finish my thought. So our district already has some district-run preschools, and so I think it's just going to be important that we continue providing education for those teachers. It's the same issue of staffing that we're seeing at the K-12 level, and early childhood as a whole is at a crossroads of education versus childcare. So that's going to be something that we have to define as a district.
That's great. I was hoping you would argue with him about what he knows.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to District A here. What's your plan to implement universal pre-K as mandated by the state by 2023? Mr. Teitler.
Well, I would like to mostly agree with completely agree with what Catherine has to say on that issue. I think it is incredible that we're getting this opportunity. We know that children who have attended preschool perform higher in pretty much all tasks school related as they go through school. So to have this opportunity for children to get at least 10 hours a week mandated preschool is a win-win for the students, the district, the parents, and everybody involved. I think, as Catherine also said, is a very interesting point, talking about academics versus just overall social development that gets to happen during these preschool years. And I think that would fit very well within our district for what we have It would give 2 years prior to going into kindergarten for people who didn't speak English coming into the schools to have 2 years of practice speaking their English and having that much of a higher level so that when they come into kindergarten, they're able to move forward with the academics and not have to devote as much of the time to language learning. So I think that would be a great benefit. And as Catherine was saying, just to have those experiences in the classroom are something that can't be replicated. And so bravo, thank you for this opportunity for our pre-K kids.
Mr. McWhorter?
I think with a lot of programs, and while I agree with the concept of universal pre-K, I get the value of it, like Kenny and Katie have both referenced. I think the problem is when it comes to being put into practice. There's a lot of things that make sense and sound great in theory, but as we've heard about the mill levy, we're already understaffed, we're already underfunded, that we're going to add on another program as we're talking about potentially having to cut programs if this doesn't pass. And it's another layer of another program to add on. Again, this isn't disagreeing with it. I guess my only concern is just as a potential board member, that would be my biggest concern, is the actual implementation of the program.
Okay. Mr. Teitler?
I guess I see that differently. I don't see it as a problem adding on. It's state mandated, first of all, so that's out of our hands as far as the board. And yes, we're going to need to implement that. But studies have shown that the greatest predictor of future success in school is preschool experience. And so having that chance at an early age to get that experience is nothing but beneficial in my eyes.
That's great. Okay, next one, we're going to start with you, Mr. McWhorter. Do you support the mill levy override? Why or why not?
I mean, this one's tricky for me because I would say in general, I'm usually against any sort of taxes unless you have exhausted cost cuts. That's just a general philosophy when it comes to anything government bureaucracy, is exhaust cost cuts where you can before you go try to increase revenue. That's a general philosophy. At the same time, I completely empathize with the cost of living here. My main concern with the mill levy in supporting it is you would want a microscope on that money to make sure that, yes, it is going to teachers. If it's branded as being for teachers, that would be my biggest concern, is to make sure funds that are supposed to go there would go there. So that would be the biggest thing, is just making sure the funds are allocated as they should.
Mr. Teitler?
I'm 100% in favor of the mill levy override, unequivocally. I think that teachers are underpaid in not only this district, but especially across the state of Colorado. As Autumn was saying earlier, we are somewhere in the lower 5 states across the nation in funding for education. We are, as Autumn also stated, the 3rd highest cost of living. We offer jobs to teachers. The teachers turn them down. If you look at our staff, over 50% of our staff are in their first 5 years of teaching. They do not last. They leave. In order for us to have a continued staff that will continue to be progressing and have that staff that is educated but also experienced, is important and imperative that we pass this. And yes, all of the money is dedicated 75% specifically to salaries, as opposed to other mill levy overrides in the past that have gone to other things. This one is devoted specifically to salary. And I think that is something that we absolutely need to do in order to continue to retain, recruit amazing teachers in our district.
No.
I would say the long-term concern is that if you look at the cost of living, I highly doubt that's going to come down. So you'll need another one of these probably sooner than you think. So that would be my biggest thing, is looking to the future. You look at inflation, and this is more coming from the world I work in. It's not stopping. Just a word of warning, gas prices are going to continue to go up, oil. So the cost of living in general is going to continue to go up.
Okay. Steve, or Mr. Potion, I'm sorry.
Well, currently, I oppose the mill levy. However, the more I learn about the mill levy, and more specifically exactly where the funding, because I'm just now beginning my serious interest in this topic. And before, I didn't know that all of the 75% of that money was going, in fact, to teacher salary. But what I will say is we have to be cautious because costs keep increasing and we need to be much more penny wise and less dollar foolish going forward. I also think that our salaries need to become performance-based and based on successful literacy and skills of aptitude, not test scores and ratings. How do we fund our schools going forward if our mill levy is capped out at this point and we're still and already underfunded? Where does the money come from next? That's my question. That's why I'm still opposed to it. I want to see the bottom line on everything.
Mrs. Cooper?
Before I get into mill levy, I wanted to give one more plug for early childhood and just tell everyone that this is our only chance to prevent an achievement gap from forming. So when you're talking about spending dollars, when you're talking about using our money wisely, when we're talking about mill levy dollars and budgeting, it's going to behoove us to look at early childhood and use these monies for universal pre-K well. Because if we can prevent this gap in the first place, we're not playing catch up with 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds. As for the mill levy, I'm 100% in support of the mill levy. The mill levy is a formula based on property taxes, so our revenues will increase as the cost of living and home prices increase. So hopefully our dollars will continue to increase with the cost of living, or maybe keep up with it. Right now, we are woefully underfunded. Per pupil, we're at about $3,000 less than the national average from the state funding formula, which is pathetic. We're 47th out of 50. So yes, this is a local issue. We need the mill levy dollars and we need them now. Our kids right now can't afford to go through school without having quality teachers, and we can't afford quality teachers without these dollars. Long term, when we're talking about the concerns about seeking more money, we do need to continue to lobby the state. Like Autumn was saying, there are some serious problems with our state funding formula. It's not working. And so that's something that I would like to be involved with and that I would hope to be involved with as we move forward.
Mr. Foshin, rebuttal?
There's no doubt that our schools are grossly underfunded. As a businessman and father, I'm confident that we can do more with what we have, provided we use it wisely. More funding is not always the answer if we're not using it wisely.
Okay, very good. And for our last question, I'm going to change a little bit from where we have been going to ask. You guys have talked a lot about tonight about parents' involvement, education versus non-education. Can you address with me, and we'll start with you, Mrs. Kuhlenberg, what are you going to do, or what would you do to get parents more involved?
So I think we have some parents that are very involved and we have some parents that aren't. And part of that is familial, part of that's cultural. But as a baseline, we need to be more open. Our schools need to be more open. When I came into this, I had some very specific ideas about what the issues were that I would be interested in. But the common refrain that I was hearing from people was that the communication within our schools is broken, that they can't get in touch with the board, that they don't feel like their voices are being heard. So I think that as a district, we need to figure out where that's coming from and we need to address it. Whether the current leadership agrees with it or not, it's a concern in the community, and so it needs to be addressed. One of the ideas that I have is kind of having a point person for a couple schools each. We have 5 board members, maybe have a point person where we have some sort of time where parents can come and just air grievances. Of course, we can't have discussions outside of a duly noted meeting, but just an opportunity to be in the community. And so the community members feel like they have someone to reach out to. Beyond that, I think that this has to happen at the local school level first, and then at the board level. So if parents aren't feeling comfortable and welcomed into their local schools, that's a school cultural issue that needs to be addressed, and we need to figure out why that is. Because first, they should feel comfortable going to their child's teacher, to the principal, before feeling like they have to take these issues up to the board level.
I would like to expand on what Catherine has brought up, and it becomes accessibility to the board members and school staff, teachers, administrators. What I've been hearing in the community is people will reach out to a teacher and not get a response, or not get a validated response and a solution to whatever problem they're coming they're bringing to the school board or the administrator. We need to open those lines of communication, and we need to make sure that the communication is going in both directions, not falling on deaf ears, if you will, by the school board or the staff. And I think that there's a lot of, I hate to use the word disinformation, but one person's experience is not necessarily a reflection of all the people's experience with the school board, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we need to get more accessibility and more communication between the school parents and the board members.
Very good. Yeah.
Yes, so I agree with a lot of what Steve is saying, but I think that there also needs to be a level of respect for the teacher's time and for the board members' time. So we can have these open lines of communication, but there also can't be this expectation that you're going to get a response immediately every single time. I feel that as a teacher and administrator, parents want you at their beck and call, and it's impossible to keep up. You burn out. So while I agree we need to open these lines of communication, I think there need to be some baseline rules and some things set out.
Mutual respect.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yep.
Wait, I don't get an immediate response from my kids' teacher. All right, we're gonna say the same question. You guys talked a lot about parenting in various different ways here. What would you do if elected to get more parents involvement, Mr. Teitler?
So I think in order to get more parent involvement, it means being that bridge between the school and the community. And I think it's very important that we make sure that we open up lines of communication back and forth between the teachers and parents especially, and getting more parents involved in their classrooms, in their schools, and in the schools in general. And I think we need to make sure that we are making sure that any communication that we send out is sent out in a bilingual manner to our parents. I want to look at our room that we have right here. There isn't a single Latino person in this room representing this important forum. Our school is made up of 55% Latino students. When you look at a school accountability committee, it's the same population we're seeing in this room right now. If we're wanting to make a difference, we need to have parent participation from all parents involved in our school district. And so we need to make sure that we are sending out messages in a way that make parents want to communicate, feel comfortable communicating. And I think that's going to be our role as the board, is to make sure we're getting this parent communication. And I felt like I was very successful in my time teaching, reaching out to parents, and I hope to be able to continue doing that on the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely want to foster the parent-teacher relationship. I think there's an aspect of removing barriers. At the same time, I don't think it's just you blanket grant the privilege for parents to engage. I mean, I think there's a responsibility too. Like we're saying, that it's not always at the beck and call. I think with privilege comes a responsibility to, yes, be respectful, to be engaged. I mean, I just reflect back when I was a student, how it appeared as a kid, how engaged the parents were. Maybe that's shifted over time. I don't know. I'm just saying, it seems like parents just in general need to be more engaged. I don't think you can force that, but I think it should be fostered in whatever capacity it can be. Like Katie said, maybe it's ambassadors at the school. It's making yourself available, having an open Q&A rather than just always a formal board meeting. Having whatever you can within the guidelines to just make yourself available, to make it more open dialogue. But I would want to stress that, I mean, with that privilege comes a responsibility. Where I maybe differ in some of the viewpoints as far as being at the beck and call is, I don't think, maybe it's just me personally in my business, I constantly get calls and emails from clients, and it's midnight, I wake up and there's something on my phone. So I think there's also on the flip side of, you can have a period where you're going to answer those emails, whatever it is. I think, yeah, there's a lot of communication tools right now that has made life more complicated, but.
Okay, any rebuttal to that, Mr. Teitler?
I just think we need to continue, if we, on the board, to give opportunity for parents to express themselves, and we need to listen to what parents are saying when they come to speak to us on the board. And we need to give that ability for parents to feel free to come to the boards and free to come to the schools and not feel intimidated in any sense in doing so, and welcome our parent input with open arms.
Okay, very good, thank you. Closing statements, you each get 2 minutes, And we'll start with you, Mrs. Kohlenberg for District E.
So thank you again for hosting this forum. I think it was a great opportunity for us to share a little bit more about who we are and what we feel is appropriate for our district going forward. I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that as a community, we all want what's best for our teachers and for our kids. We all want our kids happy and learning, growing socially and emotionally, and really feeling that sense of community that we love, and which is why we all make sacrifices to live here. So I think it's just important to remember that we have more in common than different. I respectfully ask for your vote for the board. Like I said, I feel like I have a broad amount of experience and that I am more than willing to put in the time, energy, and effort that is necessary to sit on this board. I'm ready to engage in deep discussions. I'm not afraid of disagreement. And I have been beat up by parents already for the last year and a half over COVID. So I've got a thick skin and I'm ready for it. So again, thank you. Thank all of you for being here, for taking the time. These are important issues. And I think we, as a community and as a person, you speak more when you have a problem. And when people are happy, you don't hear much. And so it's great to have people out and be able to do this in a very respectful and engaging way. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Foshin.
Thank you very much for hosting this Q&A and giving us the opportunity. And I would just like to say that implementing solutions is going to take action and ownership, and the pathway can always be changed as long as the destination remains the same. Course correction is constant. In order to make progress, you must be willing to take action. I want to be part of that action. The destination is a bright future for all the students and through the best education possible. I ask you for your vote so I can provide the conduit between the parents and the board. Thank you.
District A, Mr. Teitler.
Well, thank you for hosting this and allowing us to express our viewpoints and our ideas. And I would like to say that I feel like I am not done with education. Education has been my life. It is something the other day was thinking of it. There's only been 4 autumns where I have not been going back to school since I was 4 years old. And so it's something I miss. It's something I want to continue to participate in. And so by being on the board, this gives me an opportunity. When I retired from teaching, it wasn't because I was done with education. It was just that I was ready to move on from the unbelievable workload and the daily pressure that came with being a teacher, and so much that you needed to be thinking about at all times. And so now I look at this as my opportunity to volunteer, and it's not a job for me, but it's something that I can give back to a profession that I've loved for so long. And I think it's important to have an educational viewpoint on the board, somebody who's had the experience to see how edicts are handed down, when decisions are made, how they affect the teachers, and in essence, how they affect the students also. And so I think I can use my experience to help with the different guidelines of what it is that we're expected to do as a board member, about updating policies, which is one of the things that we're supposed to do as a board member. Identifying educational priorities, another thing that we're slated to do as a board member. And then, of course, working with the superintendent and being their evaluator. That's something that I feel like I've had practice through my curriculum development, through my work on committees, and then communicating with the public. And by being bilingual, I think I'm able to communicate with our whole entire public in our schools. And so thank you, and I do ask you for your vote, and I hope you will vote Kenny Teitler.
Thank you very much. Mr. McWhorter.
Yeah, thank you for moderating. Obviously, appreciate everybody joining. I would say just in closing, I go back to what I opened with. I think really the way that I look at this is strictly board functioning. I look at the organizational chart for the Roaring Fork School District. Again, I see parents, students, community at the top, the board right next to it. And I think that just needs to be put more into action. I think a silver lining, obviously I empathize with Katie, hearing from a lot of parents. But I think the silver lining to that is, I think you are seeing more parental engagement. I think just in general, maybe it's just a shift in times, whatever it is, I think you are seeing more parental involvement, which I think is a good thing. I think it can, in some cases, obviously be a bad thing. And again, I feel for Katie on that. But I think that's where a board should be, kind of that conduit, that we're supposed to be the absorber of that. We're supposed to communicate. We're supposed to work with the community. So I think that's from my purview, providing that oversight, I think is a key element of this. And obviously I would ask for your vote to be part of the board, to continue and put the organizational chart into action. So again, thank you everybody for joining, and have a good night.
Okay, well, I first want to personally thank you all for volunteering. I love it when our voters get a choice, and oftentimes in our valley, we don't necessarily have a choice. So thank you very much for that. All right, and thank you to the issue representatives also for participating, and to interested voters for listening tonight. I want to thank our host, Mortgage Commons. This event has again been brought to you courtesy of the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association, Glenwood Springs Post-Independent, and KMTS. This event has been recorded in English and Spanish, and those links will be provided on postindependent.com, KMTS.com, and GlenwoodChamber.com. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. So put that in your calendars. Thank you all, and have a good evening.